Good morning, friends. Let's take up on to question number 9. Mr. Sanjay, a salaried individual, pays brokerage of rupees 40 lakhs to Mr. Harish, a broker, on 5/1/2022 to buy a residential house. His father, Mr. Hari, a retired pensioner, makes contract payments of rupees 15 lakhs, 25 lakhs, and 12 lakhs on 28/9/21, 3/11/21, and 15/2/22 to Rajiv, a contractor for reconstruction of residential house. With respect to the above payments made by Mr. Sanjay and Mr. Hari, which of the following statements is correct? Neither Sanjay nor Hari is required to deduct tax at source, since they are not subject to tax audit on account of being a salaried individual and pensioner, respectively. Both Sanjay and Hari are required to deduct tax at source under the provisions of Income Tax Act, even though they are not subject to tax audit. Mr. Sanjay is required to deduct tax at source, but Hari is not required to deduct tax at source. Mr. Hari is required to deduct tax at source, but Sanjay is not required to deduct tax at source. One thing that you have to be very clear is that TDS is not applicable only when there is a tax audit. TDS is applicable to assessees who are not subjected to tax audit. So therefore, what you understand that they are not required to deduct tax and they are not subject to tax audit, this reason is not at all appropriate. So therefore, first part of the question is deleted. Then they are required to deduct tax even though they are not subjected to tax audit. So even this statement is also not correct, because to deduct tax, firstly, it should be an income in the hands of the recipient. Then number two, the payment should have exceeded the threshold points. So these are the two facts that you have got to look at. So what is that particular section in which we have got to handle this particular case? Item number C, Mr. Sanjay is required to deduct tax at source, but Hari is not required. Even this statement may not be correct, where we have got to go through the provision, look at the threshold points, and come to a conclusion. The same thing that we can tell is for D, where they say Hari is required to deduct tax at source, but Sanjay is not required to deduct tax at source. This may be, or this is seeming to be correct, but before we could select D, let us know about the threshold points. Let's go through chapter number 5. This is for TDS and TCS, and what is that particular section through which this particular case study will be running through. Payment made by an individual or HUF for contract work or by way of commission or brokerage or fees for professional services, that falls under section 194M. Applicability and rate of taxation. Section 194M provides for deduction of tax at source at the rate of 5% when an individual or HUF responsible for making any sum during the financial year to any resident for carrying out any work, including supply of labor for carrying out any work in pursuance of a contract by way of commission not being covered under 194D, and by way of fees for professional services. It may be noted that only individuals and HUF other than those who are required to deduct income tax as per provisions of section 194C, 194H, and 194J. So these three sections will be applicable only when that individual or HUF were to run a business or profession. So only then the incidence of the application of 194C, H, and J will arise. So for person who is not covered under profits and gains from business or profession, but when he is forced to make those payments, under which section they are covered? So quite naturally, 194M will come into play. Are required to deduct tax in respect of the above sums payable during the financial year to a resident. So that is the reason as why you find they have mentioned that this person is a salaried individual and Hari is a retired pensioner. So therefore, these payments will not come under 194 C, H, and J. So therefore, we have got to search for 194M for the same title of payment when they are not coming under PGBP So quite naturally, 194M got introduced very recently. So now let us just look into the threshold point. No tax is required to be deducted where such sum or as the case may be, aggregate amount of such sums credited or paid to a resident during the financial year does not exceed 50 lakhs. So in the case study that we have, Mr. Sanjay paid 40 lakhs, which is less than the threshold point. So Sanjay is not required to deduct tax, is more appropriate. Now we are going to get it confirmed clearly that Hari is subjected to deduct tax. Now let's sum up the payments that he had made. 15 lakhs, 25 lakhs, 40 lakhs cumulatively, and cumulatively now after taking 12 lakhs there, it crossed the threshold point. So by the hit of 50 lakhs itself, it is like that. I mean, you should have it a little greater than 50 lakhs to have its application. And in this particular case, if you sum up all the three payments, it is exceeding 50 lakhs. And quite naturally, Mr. Hari, a retired pensioner who made the contract payments for such payments that he had made, this 194M will come into play and Mr. Hari is required to deduct tax but not Sanjay. So this is the way we are expected to conclude on question number 9. I hope that the analysis in bringing out item number D as the correct answer is easy for comprehension. Thank you.